Welcome back to S4HANA Analytics Learning Series. My name is Shrikant. In my previous session, I gave an overview of S4HANA system and its advantages and also embedded analytics scenarios. We also looked at ABAP programming model for S4HANA and CDS views at very high level. So in today's session, we will focus on CDS views in detail. And this is going to be continued for next few sessions. Before we get started with the CDS views, let's take a look at the tooling first. So we're going to use ABAP development tools or ADT in Eclipse or HANA Studio. Let's take a look at the tool in the system. Here I got my HANA Studio and I have ADT installed on my Studio. You can also install ADT on Eclipse. The installation is very simple. You can go to help and say install new software, and it will be providing ADT tooling from on-demand tools. So you can get that from this link and you have these tools available here. Once the installation is completed, you will be able to see ABAP perspective here on HANA Studio or Eclipse. So in ABAP perspective of HANA Studio, you can start creating report programs, class methods, function modules, any of the reporting ABAP repository objects. You can also create CDS views, core data services in ABAP perspective of HANA. Some of the objects like core data services you cannot do in GUI, SAP GUI, so it's very important to have ADT installed on HANA Studio or Eclipse to start working on new ABAP on HANA objects for S4HANA system. There's a little confusion around all the time. Working in ABAP perspective on HANA is not meant that you're working in HANA database, because of the reason that you're still working on ABAP layer or ABAP stack of S4HANA system when you do your ADT developments. The only time you have access or working in database is to go in development perspective or modular perspective to do native developments. That's where you are directly working on HANA database. The ABAP perspective in HANA is not exactly directly working on database. So there are different tools available for us in doing the developments. ABAP on Eclipse, Studio, WebID for native developments, and etc. I have a blog here which can explain different tools available for us, and then the pros and cons and what tool will be used for what kind of purpose and etc. is explained in this blog. So you can take a look at this blog. It explains Studio, Eclipse, Web Workbench, WebID, and WebID for HANA, and where to use what tool. Okay, and then let's get into the topic of CDS views in detail. Core data service is a concept introduced along with HANA platform, and it is initially given for native HANA persistent model, and it also has an ABAP flavor, which is what we currently the topic of interest for us in S4HANA, ABAP CDS views. So there are two flavors always associated along with in HANA and S4HANA use cases. We'll not go into the details of native HANA CDS, which is used for persistent, just because that's not something we are going to focus on this course. So we'll focus on ABAP CDS views that is meant to be for S4HANA analytical models or any of the transactional processing as well. So let's get into the details of ABAP CDS only. So what is mean CDS is CDS is an OpenSQL based approach to create some artifacts in a ABAP layer, which can have a greater push down to HANA database. So the interaction between HANA and the ABAP is going to be very tightly integrated, and you will have a complete push down to HANA to get the better performance out of it. And also you will have a conceptual model involved in CDS, so that the implementation is going to be very easy, and you also have a lot of flexibilities in terms of writing the SQL programming within CDS model. So let's see what are the different features we're going to get with the CDS models. The first topic I'm going to talk about is, if SQL can do everything, then why CDS? So we've been looking at SQL code in HANA directly, so to get the better push, why do we need push down? If you're going to write everything in SQL, so it's almost very close integration to the database, and database can understand the language very easily and the performance can be very effective. But why CDS if there is an SQL option to do everything? There is always a conceptual gap between what is meant to be our objective and what is actually writing in the system. You can take a look at the example here. So get the name and ID from a table is your task, and in order to do this task, your implementation is going to be in a way that you're going to write these left outer joins and where clause and etc. When it comes to the implementation, it's big rather than the task. Similarly, in another exercise, you also see for another issue or requirement, you will be ending up in having a loop and filters applied inside the loop and etc. But these kind of issues can be easily resolved using CDS model, because you're going to have a reusable component of CDS views stored at one point, then it will be reusing them whenever required, wherever required, as part of associations. You can take a look at this example, that this home address is being created as an association, and then I'm reusing this association to get the zip code from this. The implementation becomes so easy for us to understand in a better way, rather than having a complex looping logic within SQL coding. Okay, that's how the CDS has been evolved to provide a lot of flexibilities which SQL cannot do. Let's take a different topic here, how different ABAP CDS from traditional ABAP. So this diagram is going to explain a lot from the screen. You can see the traditional ABAP with OpenSQL, you cannot do a lot of joins, and also calculation expressions and aggregations are so difficult in traditional ABAP programming with OpenSQL. And the nesting of the views is very complex when you're creating the DB views or SQL views in traditional way. All these challenges can be easily solved by CDS views. You can have inner joins, outer left union, all kinds of joins. Also you can have expressions, aggregations and grouping and etc. Can be done in ABAP CDS. And then nesting is possible. You can have associations and also CDS views created, and then can use these CDS views in another CDS views. The nesting concept has been fulfilled here. Okay, there's a nice video I put it in here which explains about the CDS views in different formats and how the interactions happens with the database layer and then to the ABAP layer and etc. So it's worth to watch this video and get the time. Let's take a look at the architecture of CDS views. We don't really need to spend a lot of time in the architecture here, but we'd like to spend some time on the VDM, the virtual data model. That's a very important topic for us in this course. This course is basically covering up the embedded analytics model. So in this embedded analytics model, the VDM is going to play the very important role to have different layered approach in a hierarchy way, and that gets to the reporting of the objects in S4 analytical systems. Let me zoom in here, and you can see that there are three different views we basically work most of the time: private views, interface views, and consumption views. So let's start with the interface views a bit. So this is very core and important section of the views. So the interface views will be subdivided into basic views and also composite views. And then the basic views is going to hit the database tables directly, and then composite views will access the basic views. And your consumption view will be built on the composite view to provide reporting analytics to business users as well as another external reporting applications. Private views are a little different. They are very similar to the private methods in code traditional ABAP, private classes, private declarations, where you don't want to expose your logic or the calculations to external views. So in that case, you will keep those transformations inside private views, and they cannot be modified or they cannot be accessed directly by external views. So those will be accessed within private views itself, or the view which is calling the private view inside it. So that makes sure the logic inside the private views are secure and they are not available to the public views and public access, so that they serve the purpose of having private. I'll give a little explanation in this document as well. You can go through them. Most of our time in the next few sessions we'll be discussing on this. We'll be creating several interface views with basic as well as composite, and then we'll create some consumption views as well. All these views are going to have several annotations. When you create them, you will be associating a lot of metadata to it, which will have semantics, greater semantics, rich semantics you can call, and you can also do data type and data definition, the type of data it is going to hold. All with the metadata of those CDS views can be done using annotations. Okay, some of the important features of CDS views, you can see from this diagram that the associations, we'll focus a lot of time on associations because we don't use joins a lot in CDS views. They're going to serve the purpose of joins, associations, but on top of that it's going to use for reusable purpose, and also the associations are very powerful in terms of instrumentation process of calculation engine that only runs when it is required, only takes the objects when it is required. So this is making more sense in terms of performance when you're doing it in the joins, opposed to joins. There's a lot of documentation reference I've given here, so you can take a look at this and get more insight into annotations and also the CDS definitions and etc. from these documentation links. Okay, so that's enough for the introduction. We'll come back to the topics when we go into the exercises. So let's start with some of the exercises to understand how the CDS models are going to work in the system. Okay, I'm going to choose a finance model to explain this different CDS views. The finance model in S/4HANA is centered with the transaction table called Universal Ledger @k. Then I got few master data or dimension tables associated to this fact transaction. They are company code master and cost center master, profit center, cost element, and fiscal year, and then GL account. And these master data tables will also have further text and other attribute tables to be associated, like currency and country, controlling area, and etc. So we'll build some of the models for master data, and we will associate these models into the transaction data, and then we'll finally provide this model to consumption model, and then reports can be generated out of that. Okay, let's start with exercise 1. We're going to start with a basic CDS view on company code table. Let's go to the system. I'm going to access this one. So before getting started with the CDS views, so you can see here I have my programs created. They are basic report programs in general. You can have an interface here which is very similar to your GUI interface, I don't want to get into the GUI interface to create any of the objects in this course. We'll use ADT interface for all kinds of examples and exercises what we do here in this course. If you wanted to execute this object or report program, you can go and choose this object and say run as ABAP application. It's going to go into the GUI screen, but we don't want to get into the GUI screen. That's the default screen we have, but we would like to see that in application console. This console is given as part of the ADT interface, so you can run your programs or any of the ABAP repository objects in console and to see the data here. So that's going to be a console log here, and then you will see the output of the program in runtime here. You can see the output of this program in the console. It's the ABAP console. So that's I'm displaying the first row from the T001 table. That's the company code data table, and I took this into work area and then display the work area results. That's the result of it. So I previously executed this program on 4. So that's the previous log. I got this one, and I can clear this log and I can run it again so that it gets a fresh log from this point in time. The creation of object is very simple. I can create a package first. I don't want to create any new package. I have my project here. You can add a new project from this menu. So add ABAP project. You can give a name to your project and start working on objects creation inside this project. Since I have already created my project, I don't want to create a new one. And you will see all the packages, the system packages here. You can create custom package and start building your objects inside that. I'm not creating any custom packages for these exercises. You also see local objects here, $TMP. So I don't want to transport any of the objects into a next system, so I can keep my objects development inside TMP as a local object, so that I can avoid transportation of objects with creating requests and all these routes and etc. So in this local object, I'm going to start building any new objects. I'm going to say new and say ABAP program. This is going to allow me to create a report program just like what I've shown just now. You can create an interface, ABAP class, or any other ABAP repository objects. So since we're going to focus more on the CDS views in this course, I'll start directly jump on to creating a CDS views right now. So let's say there are a bunch of folders. You can see BOPF, business objects, libraries, BSPs, and core data services folder. You can go to this folder and expand and see what kind of object you're going to build, or you can also search for these core data services directly from search button. So you get to this point and you'll see data definition. That's the object which we will be creating in this session right now. Let's start it. So I'm going to choose package TMP. As I said before, I'm going to name this view as interface view. That's the basic view, and I'm going to start creating a view for company code data. Let's say company code basic view. Okay, and I'm going to give the description to it. Let's say company master data or company code basic. I'm going to say next, and it's going to ask me for transport. No transport, just because I put it in TMP. I'll go to next, and here I've got a few templates. We'll go into the templates later. It makes our life easy by choosing the template, so that you get some annotations associated and the syntax associated are ready-madely given, and you can just change the template to have your own data sources and tables in it. Let's start with the basic template, which is define view. You can even start without choosing any template, that's your wish, but I always start with choosing a template here. So then say finish. Get into the screen here with a basic template with some annotations. We're not going to look at these annotations at this moment, so I'm going to remove some of the annotations. As I said, these annotations give you a lot of metadata functionality to be associated to this CDS views, which you cannot do along with the the regular traditional database views or SQL views. So that's the biggest advantage when you're working with CDS views. Annotations provides a lot of metadata to it to capture. So I'm going to name this as a going to name SQL view. This is for database. I can say database code, and this is going to be my label. And I'm defining the view ICOM code basic. This is case sensitive. I can change the name to C caps as well. I can also name this as I, and this is my data source. So I'm going to put T001, that's the table name, and I'm going to define all the columns which I will be using in to create this basic CDS views. I can choose to provide all the columns. So if you wanted to get some help, kind of a F4 help, you just do control space, that's the code completion, and you've got few options here. Insert all elements, so it's going to insert all the elements from your table. If you don't want to do this one and you wanted to do one by one, you cannot do so. I'm going to choose one by one. For that, I'll take again control space, code completion. I'll get my columns here. I choose with comma separated. I can choose control completion again and to pick the text, and I also do comma and then code completion to get the next column here, which is going to be my address number. I'm fine with these 3 columns. If I wanted, I can have more columns as well. Right now I'm good with these 3 columns. I'm going to end this with semicolon. That's not period here. Traditional ABAP always ends with period, but here I'm going to use a semicolon to end a statement. That's it. I'm done. So I'm creating a basic CDS view for company code columns to display or to hold it, and I'll say activate it. So it's reading the data from T001, it's the database table, and it's going to have these 3 columns for data display. So that's it. The basic CDS view is created. You can see that from this core data services folder, and you have a definition. This is the CDS view, and this is your database view. Let me explain this concept a bit, but just before getting into the concept, I'll show how the data is displayed for the CDS. You can choose this data definition and say right click and say run as, or actually you can open with data preview, and you get the data displayed in the window. Okay, now let's get back to the topic of what are these objects: definition, CDS view, and the SQL view or the database view. Go to the documentation page to explain this topic. So this is how the topic, when you create the DDL source, that's what the D means. That's the object we created, this D, and it creates 2 objects. One is SQL view and another one is CDS view entity. You can see that's the CDS view entity, and there is a SQL view or database view. The SQL view is accessible in database only inside the HANA database. You can also access it from data dictionary as well as ABAP prospective or ABAP screen of GUI, but it is modifiable. It is not modifiable there, but you can have it look at the database layer. And this is a CDS view is a ABAP layered object, which you can have it in ABAP layer, and you can modify that, and you can access this CDS view entity in further CDS views. You don't want to access SQL view in further CDS views because it is a runtime and database object rather than reusable object like CDS view entity. So when I'm using nesting, I'm going to use this entity. That's going to be the name, this one. Okay, that's about the objects creation part. So let's take another example from another table. I'll go to my Eclipse or Studio. I'm going to choose another CDS view object here. This time I'm going to, since I have a folder here, I can directly go to Go Data Services and create a new one. I'm going to do the data definition. I can name this as my second one as currency, and then so a description, give some description, currency view basic, and say next. I'll just go with the same template what I have used before, define view. It's done. I got the screen, and I'll come to these annotations when it is required. I remove those annotations. I'm going to give the SQL view name. There's nothing special I'm doing here, so I just wanted to copy paste from my Notepad. So I maintain all my Notepad files in this Visual Studio Code. So I can grab those for the currency code and just taking and then pasting in my so that I can save a lot of time in explaining this topic. So I gave my SQL view name as currency code, and I gave the currency basic as my label, and I use these 4 fields to define this view. I'm going to activate it, and it's going to create a CDS view with this name, and then DDL database view with this name. Okay, you can choose to see the SQL statement which is getting prepared in the behind the scenes. So you can go to you can choose a SQL create statement, and it's going to display the HANA SQL which is getting actually the SQL Open SQL which is getting generated behind the scene. So that's the CDS structure what we are using here. The database, it's going to generate a SQL for us based on whatever this label, syntax, annotations we give. It's going to generate a SQL accordingly. Okay, you can also see the data preview from here, or you can choose from there. So I'm going to say open with, and then data preview. You will see the data in it, which we already seen in the past, and you can also apply some filters in here. We'll do some of these things in the next sessions. So you can also see a graphical editor for this one. So the open with graphical editor. This is going to show us how it looks in graphical. We cannot modify the CDS view using this graphical editor, but certainly we can display the CDS view in the graphical editor. Okay, this is how the graphical editor looks like. It makes more sense when we have complex or bigger CDS views, so you can understand the relation between the tables to the CDS views, and the entire hierarchy of the VDM can be understood in a better way. Okay, I'm going to show another example in this session. That's going to be another basic CDS view to apply a filter on it. Also a join on two tables. Of course, we can still use joins if required, but there are more than associations uses will be doing going forward. So associations are having more, better advantages than joins, as we discussed already, but we'll come into the details of those benefits when we go into the associations. But let's see first how a join can work and how the join looks like. If you wanted to use joins, you can welcome to use joins when required. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to create a new core data services, new data definition. I'm going to say company code master. Okay, and this example or exercise, I'll create a CDS view by joining two tables. So I'm going to choose a different template, which is called define view with join, and then say okay. So it's going to give me a slightly different template than the one before. I'll come to this authorization check and compare filter in the later exercises. Okay, so now you can see that it's defining the view, select from data source name, that's your first data source, and left outer join, that's the default join. You can change to inner or outer, right outer, etc. That's from left outer join to the target data source name. And then this is going to be your join condition from your first table and then second table. I can slowly do that by giving the data source names replaced, but I already have something prepared, my Notepad. I'm going to grab that and paste it here so that I can save time. So this is what I have it in my Notepad file. I'm going to put that right there. So the SQL name I have given is the company code master, and that's the database view name, labeled, and then define the view, select from, that's my first table as a data source, and then left outer join to my second table, the target data source. On condition, I have given three columns. One is LAN 1, that's the country code, and client, and then language is equal to English. And then I am defining the CDS view columns here, and the first two columns are BUKRS and MENT, the company code and the client. I also need to specify the data source name while defining the columns, because these columns are identified in two tables, the data source table as well as target data. Just like any other SQL, I need to identify the column name with the table name. If it is only coming from one table, I don't have to do that, but in this case I have to do, because these columns are available in two tables. And I wanted to make these two columns as part of the key for this CDS view, so I make this syntax as key for this first two columns. And then I have non-key columns, LAN 1 and also LAN X is only coming from this target table, and so that it doesn't require table to be associated, table name to be associated. And I end my CDS view definition of CDS view column names here. I'm adding a syntax to add where clause to filter data on English language, which is going to be SPRAS is equal to English. So this view I'm going to activate. It's going to get me data by joining to country table, which is T005T, and then get the text of the country and also the key as well. Let's take a data display of this series view. I'm going to say open with data preview. You can see the company code, client, and the country code, and as well as the description of the country. So it's all for English because we have a filter applied on this series view to get. You can also have some navigational filters in this window, but I'm not really doing any of those in here right now. Let's take a look at this LAN 1. I wanted to see only for DE1. Applied on DE1, just pick the you can search for DE. That's the country. I'm going to take a look, and then you'll see all the records for country DE. So this is just for navigational runtime filters applying for analyzing the results, but not applied on this the core definition of the series view. So you can see this is the SQL generated behind the scene. You can check the syntax, and you can run it, and you can do all kind of actions for your analyzing the data perspective. So yeah, and in our next session we're going to look at more annotations, more semantics to the series views, and we also focus on associations and filter expressions and several types of expressions and functions and etc. That's it for today's session. I hope it's very helpful to you, and we'll come back with next exercise in the coming session. For video recordings of detailed course, please reach out to me on my email ID, surampallys@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.